Hi, it's Dwyer. It is November 6, 2024. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. Always 1776.com, a free site. It is the morning after Election Day. Let's talk about Donald Trump's victory. Let's talk about a few other things, what I believe Donald Trump should do. Let's recognize that this is primarily a gambling site. If you're a sports fan, just go by this video if you're not interested in politics. We're just going to be talking politics here. But I believe our voice, people who are into sports betting, people who might not be beholden to any particular party, who believe in free markets and free speech, I believe our voice matters. And I've noticed I have a very vibrant subscriber base here online. The subscribers are vocal. Many of you are from different walks of life, support different candidates. Let's get our voices heard here. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let me also warn people, this is not a politically correct take, right? I'm not trying to adhere to any party line. I'm not here trying to run for office or to get votes, right? Let me also point out, too, I voted for Chase Oliver, not Kamala Harris, not Donald Trump. Understand where I'm coming from. I mentioned that simply to be transparent. Now, it looks like Trump won the popular vote. The very idea of this got me laughed at by many of my friends who are ardent or were ardent Kamala Harris supporters. Now, it is the first time in the last 20 years that the GOP has won the popular vote, right? Of course, Trump won the Electoral College. We'll receive official confirmation of that in a few days once the mail-in ballots are counted. Now understand, I mentioned the possibility on this site of Trump winning the popular vote several weeks ago. I'm going to have to now figure out how to get my money off of Polymarket because these beloved regulators have made it tough for Americans like me to invest on that site. I did try to increase my position recently on the popular vote bet, and the site wouldn't let me. Right? Unbelievable. So, in the comments section, what I want to do is to encourage those of you who made the bet to tell us the odds you got. Right, folks? It's a bonanza. You got long odds. Tell us the odds you got on the bet on the GOP winning the popular vote. Right? Also, of course, Trump won the election. Tell us the odds you got on that bet as well. Let me point out, I made a video during the race at around 5:30ish yesterday on the possibility of Trump winning the state of Virginia. He did not do so. But he did win Georgia. He did win North Carolina. He did win Pennsylvania. Now, I'm going to offer some advice to Donald Trump. Understand, this is one man's opinion. I don't expect anyone here to agree with me. I just want to raise some points. I believe some of you privately will agree with some of the points I'm making. I don't expect anyone to turn to their family and say, hey, here's what I think about the issue of sanctions. Right? But what I do want to do is to just get these views here in a video that people can revisit, look at down the road as this second Trump presidency unfolds. Put simply, I'm just another citizen trying to further public conversation. Right? I think sometimes people like us are not heard. Now, the first bit of advice, take care of your own people. Pardon everyone involved in the January 6th peaceful protest. Right? Some folks called what happened, which involved people wearing costumes, people wearing multicolored wigs, very few people carrying guns, no one with an interest to kill members of Congress. Right? This is a protest. In the 60s, you had sit-ins. You had people showing up in places and sitting in and refusing to move unless they were arrested. Right, folks? Here you have a bunch of taxpayers taking over a building in Washington. Right? While, of course, security are just standing there, letting them walk in the front door. Right? I'm sure the majority of the people just viewed it as a protest over the results of a presidential election in which, quite frankly, there were several irregularities. Several. Right? Some of them caught on film. What Trump needs to do, first thing, literally, I take my hand off the Bible. I would have someone there with the paperwork. I would start signing the paperwork. I would pardon everyone involved in January 6th. I would even go further. Ashley Babbitt's family, I would just say, look, I'm going to support a GoFundMe page where her family gets compensated for her loss of life. Right? You don't have to stick the taxpayers with the bill. By the way, that should be a theme of the second Trump term. You don't have to stick the taxpayers with the bill. The presidency has a certain power. It's a bully pulpit. You can say to people, remember Ashley Babbitt, and make sure her family is compensated without having to go through the court system. I would also pardon myself. Folks, anyone involved in the lawfare should feel ashamed. Understand, Trump was tried for bank fraud on a loan that he repaid in a case where the bank itself testified that they did not rely on any disclosure Trump made in his loan application. Right? Let me also say, too, as someone who has had trials where I have supported, prosecuted women who had domestic violence claims, it's ridiculous that Trump was found guilty of defamation on a rape case that did not involve any forensic evidence, where no one saw Trump in the location where the alleged rape was supposed to have taken place. If I'm Trump, and keep in mind, Trump's a lame duck. This is his second term. He's already been impeached twice. That's how ridiculous the lawfare has been. If I'm Trump, I don't care what anyone says. I pardon myself to the maximum extent possible. Let's go further. You were a victim of lawfare and likely privately know that current New York City Mayor Eric Adams, right? And understand, I was raised in New York City. I consider New York City to be my hometown. Eric Adams has been one of New York City's better mayors, quite frankly. Right? If I am Donald Trump, just to let the powers that be understand that this kind of overly aggressive judiciary is not to be tolerated, I would either pressure my Justice Department to cut a deal with Eric Adams, or I would just pardon him outright. Let's make another point, and I'll agree. This sounds unfair, but life's unfair. My primary focus would be on going forward. I would need to telegraph to even my political adversaries who've been ridiculous with me that that's not going to be the tone of my administration. I would strongly consider as a goodwill gesture pardoning Hunter Biden. I know many people disagree. Tell us about it in the comments section of this YouTube video. I'm not trying to be popular. I'm very happy when I look at a video and I see I have 500 views. I'm not one of these people who needs 5,000 views or 50,000 views, right? I'm not a TikToker. I'm not on TikTok, right? I have a TikTok account, but I don't publish videos there. In my eyes, the best part of Donald Trump's first term was when he passed Opportunity Zone legislation that incentivized private capital to invest in depressed areas, right? Income inequality, lack of opportunity should be a top concern of Trump's administration. It was of his last administration. Let me point out that Trump needs to ask himself why, at least with black men and Latino men, why his numbers improved with them. Right? I hope Trump expands the idea of opportunity zones throughout the United States. Meet up with Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, as well as other mayors, and find a way to incentivize private capital to invest in South Central Los Angeles, South Side Chicago, South Boston, Deep East Oakland, and other similar situations throughout the United States. Let me also say too, and I know Joe Manchin has stepped away from politics. If I am Donald Trump, I need to talk to Joe Manchin. I need to talk with him about Appalachia. I need to talk with Kid Rock. I need to talk with him about the rough parts of Nashville, about the rough parts of Memphis. And here again, I need to try to link private capital to areas that need a capital infusion, where people aren't getting enough of an opportunity. Now, critics, of course, are going to say, hey, this is just a giveaway to private capital, right? Folks, people without ideas on how to address poverty are always going to be your biggest critics. Right? If I'm Trump, I don't care about them. They don't have any real ideas. Right? Their ideas always involve taxing people, imaginary programs where people are supposed to get $50,000 for starting a business, courtesy of the taxpayer. Right? If I'm Trump, I point out that yes, we're giving tax breaks to people with capital so they can invest in areas and people that don't have capital. I wouldn't feel embarrassed about it. I would embrace it. I would talk openly about it. I would want depressed areas to know that I'm making moves to bring capital in. Let me also point out too that I like politicians who take risks. I don't like the politicians who won't propose legislation because they feel it might not get the votes. Now, Trump now has a GOP majority in the Senate. That's clear. Right? Understand, one of John F. Kennedy's best moves from the Oval Office was to write out the Civil Rights Act of 1963. Now, you may not have heard about it because it did not pass. But understand, Kennedy pushed it. After his death, major parts of it became the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Lyndon Johnson got the opportunity to take the victory lap. If I'm Donald Trump, I dare Congress, especially those in my own party, to not pass the opportunity legislation that I'm putting forward to help depressed areas. Right? This isn't going to be one of those deals where I'm afraid to propose legislation. I'm asking lobbyists to come up with legislation. No. This legislation needs to be authored from the Oval Office. It needs to be based on the Opportunity Zone legislation he passed already in his first term. Right? Understand, investors are looking for incentives and greater than market rates of return. Right? This is excellent advertising for them as well. Right? I have no problem rewarding people with money if they're helping folks in South Central Los Angeles, Deep East Oakland, Harlem, depressed areas. Right? Nor do I have a problem shining a light on people of the other political party. Right? Yeah, Joe Manchin's a Democrat. Okay, fine. Right? If I'm Trump, the people who agree with me that places like Appalachia need help, right? I have no problem, working with them, even if they're Democrats, right? Let's get problems solved. Country first, as John McCain used to say. On foreign policy, some of these topics are dodgy. You're not going to solve them until you address them. On foreign policy, I would make it clear to Netanyahu that the killing has to stop now. Right? Not next month, this month. We can back Israel without backing him. Understand, I'm not here to beg if I'm Trump, right? Because I'm the president of the United States. If Netanyahu doesn't listen, then I'm going to start meeting with other political parties in Israel. Again, we can support Israel without supporting Netanyahu. Right? Make it clear, if Netanyahu doesn't play ball with us, that we want a change of leadership there. Also, bring in some new voices. There are many people who are horrified by what's going on in Gaza. Right? One of them is Nassim Taleb, who has been a critic of what is happening. If I'm Donald Trump, I reach out to him. I open lines of communication. Right? I need to hear from the Palestinian side of the equation. Right? I would make it clear to everyone that violence is not the answer. I would include Peacenik, Tulsi Gabbard, in the conversation. The Ukraine. My friends hate me for this opinion. It is what it is. Ukraine, the war there has been over for some time, hasn't it? I would let Zelensky know that the United States is not going to fund protracted wars with no end games. He has to resolve it and recognize that he's not getting the land back. I would also be open in pointing out that NATO needs to stop poking the Russian bear. Our country, the United States of America, has its own Monroe Doctrine. Let's openly acknowledge Putin's desire not to have NATO up on its border. That's a concept that shouldn't be hard for a country with its own Monroe Doctrine to understand. Let's talk about some other areas where I believe Trump needs to break from the Biden administration. If we're going to continue to be the world's reserve currency, as upsetting as this thought is to idealists, we cannot prevent foreign countries, even Russia, post-invasion of Ukraine, from having access to their deposits in United States banks. We can't deny them access to the SWIFT banking system, as unpopular as this position is. We need to assure Russia and other BRIC nations that such actions won't happen in the future. Folks, that's the price that comes with being the world's reserve currency. Let me point out that Biden's policy of levying sanctions has led to countries planning their own trading systems without us. That weakens the United States of America. That jeopardizes our reserve currency status. Understand, we benefit greatly from being the world's reserve currency. If I'm Donald Trump, I make it clear that depriving foreign countries of their own assets here in the United States is not going to happen going forward. Let me also criticize Trump here. It's a big reason why I did not vote for him. He needs to stop the tariffs. He needs to have an end game. People like Art Laffer claim that Trump is pursuing tariffs really to gain leverage in talks for free trade. But folks need to be clear here and realize that tariffs are actually a tax on the American people. Tariffs are inflationary. In other words, I'm interested in buying a Chinese electric vehicle. Suddenly, the price is higher than it should be. Folks, it's inflationary. Right? It's a tax that I'm paying, right? Because I'm buying the car. I'm the one paying the tariff, not the Chinese government. Right? Not only that, folks, tariffs lead to sloppiness by American companies. Understand, they no longer have to compete with the low-cost provider. They only have to compete with the price of their competition with the tariff slapped on. Pretty soon, American companies will find themselves in a position where they can't compete worldwide without tariffs. Right? A big part of their market should be the ability to sell American goods and services in China. Right? They won't be able to compete in price. If they can only compete on price in the United States with this government intervention, this tariff. What Trump needs to do, since he wants to do away with the income tax, and I applaud that, is to consider transitioning to a consumption tax. It doesn't have to be done all at once. Let me point out, too, that with a consumption tax, understand the argument that illegal immigrants are avoiding tax liability falls apart. Because, of course, illegal immigrants would have to pay sales taxes. They would have to pay consumption taxes. Right? So, give people an opportunity to control their tax liability. You don't have to pay a consumption tax if you don't consume that good or service. Give people the opportunity to control their tax liability by controlling their consumption patterns. Let's talk about another controversial area. I know years ago, we were all hot and bothered by monopolies. Right? You would look at a company and you would say, oh, that company's too big. What Trump needs to do is he needs to relax antitrust laws. Right, folks? Companies that look like they have monopolies aren't monopolies. Right? You could look at Google and make the claim that Google is controlling the search market online. Right, folks? Google is already under an existentialist threat on search from AI companies. Whatever happened in the past isn't happening now. Let me point out how important it is to relax antitrust laws. AI is incredibly capital intensive. right? Some of these companies are losing money on your AI searches. The infrastructure is enormous. The energy needs are enormous. I not only have to build digital centers, I have to find a way to provide them with energy. These tech companies are now trying to work deals with nuclear plants. Understand, too, what looks like a monopoly, Amazon, online retail, is low margin and is actually being subsidized by other parts of the Amazon empire, such as cloud computing. Right? So if Trump wants to make America great again, right, he needs to allow these magnificent 7 companies some leeway in terms of how they structure their business and possible antitrust exposure that they have. He needs to instruct his Justice Department to let them be, because size itself does not connote a monopoly. Right? If we want to be able to compete internationally, we need to realize that companies like Amazon have major international competitors. Mercado Libre, for example. Let me continue. I have given up on Washington, D.C. I think the political climate is always going to be toxic in Washington, D.C. So if I'm Trump, I would have a shadow cabinet that consists of visionaries around me, right? I don't want to hamstrung any of my advisors, right? Any of my inner circle with official titles or the need for Senate hearings, government approval, right? So Tulsi Gabbard, who is a peace-oriented individual, right, and who helped Trump prepare for his pivotal debate. It was a one-off against Kamala Harris, right? A debate that my friends seemed to think at the time Harris won, that I believe actually finished her campaign. Right? Saying that you own a gun is non-responsive as to why you're preventing people from owning handguns in San Francisco. Right? These mandatory gun buybacks are really gun confiscation programs. That's what Kamala Harris supported in the past. Understand, I thought when Kamala was pushing this, Trump thinks that there were fine people on both sides of the race issue, debunked point. I thought she lost the election because people understood she was not bringing the highest level of credibility to the talk, right? This was the debate where she was asked, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And her answer had something to do with her being from a middle-class family, right? Well, just understand, Tulsi Gabbard is an essential part of Trump's inner circle, right? She should be an active part of his foreign policy. But he needs to realize that he needs two groups. He needs the public face, the person who can sail through Congress, the person who doesn't have much of a past, so they'll get a rubber stamp, right? The person who doesn't cross the street on red lights, so, they'll be the Boy Scout that is the Secretary of State. But then he needs a real world person, someone he actually trusts, someone without a title. It's the people without a title who are in your inner circle, who he can actually talk the real politic with and formulate his foreign policy. He needs to have this mindset for everything, right? Understand, Elon Musk, major entrepreneur, right? Tesla's just part of the empire, right? His private space company is just an essential part right now of satellite deployment in the United States. But we understand real people have real lifestyles, right? Elon Musk is a guy who has a Nick Cannon type of family, right? Different women have different kids of his. We understand that in a political setting, an Elon Musk might have a problem explaining the $1 million a day giveaway that he was running during the presidential race. You understand people are going to try to score points, pointing out that Elon Musk has a vibrant business right now in China, etc. Right? Washington's a cesspool. If I'm Donald Trump, Elon Musk will remain one of my trusted advisors. We're going to talk about major issues concerning the United States. I want to hear from this guy. This guy has a lot to say. I don't want to put him in front of Congress, right? Again, I need some Boy Scout or some Girl Scout to be in front of Congress. I need a public face for what I'm doing. But understand the real power would be behind the position, right? Let me also point out, too, that Robert F. Kennedy lost an uncle, in my opinion, to the deep state. We now find out the magic bullet wasn't magical at all, right? We found out the person who found that bullet, the Secret Service member, has now written a book. Of course, we now know that JFK's brain went missing while in, deep state custody, right? Government custody, right? So, Robert F. Kennedy, if I'm Donald Trump and Robert F. Kennedy comes to me and says, look, I want to preside over the CIA, I don't blink. We understand RFK, who had a former heroin addiction, would have a hard time surviving congressional scrutiny. Right? I would sit down with him and I would say, look, I want you to have input in how I see the CIA. Right? I would give him the choice. Do you want an official position or do you want an informal position where you have a lot of authority? Right? If he decides he wants an official title, I would back him as he tries to make it through Congress. I would also make sure that my party understands that I'm not going to look kindly on an effort to torpedo his effort to be CIA director. Let me also point out, too, that I love the idea of Ron DeSantis debating Gavin Newsom. Right? Understand, I'm in California. In California, Gavin Newsom is doing his damnedest to get rid of entry-level positions in the fast food industry. Right? I'm just wondering if it's dawned on on Gavin Newsom, that $20 an hour is going to kill a lot of demand for fast food, especially from families who are trying to make ends meet. Right? If I'm Trump, Ron DeSantis would be an integral part of my administration. I might have him, literally, be my debater. In other words, I would have him debating the Gavin Newsoms on an ongoing basis in public forums. Right? I would have him, be my public interface. He doesn't have to have a formal title. He doesn't have to be, White House press secretary. Right? His time's valuable. No doubt he has a lot of opportunities in the private sector once he, finishes his public sector tenure. But I would certainly have him be someone who the public understands has my ear, who the public understands I meet with. If there's a future pandemic thing, I want DeSantis to be the voice of my administration. Now let's get controversial here. There is a group of people who Trump has rubbed the wrong way. Trump needs to mend that bridge. The burden is actually on Trump. Now, in my opinion, the best president of my adult life that I've been aware of, right? I was too young. I was too young for, to know who the president was for part of my life. But once I became voting age, the best president that I know of, whose administration I lived through, was Bill Clinton. Now, Clinton had his own problems, right? I'm not a fan of the death penalty. Understand Trump's criminal justice reform undid a lot of laws Clinton put in place that had an unfair impact on poor communities, right? Fake distinctions between powdered cocaine and crack cocaine. But understand, Bill Clinton is a needed voice. He's the opposite of Donald Trump. Trump is a cheap money real estate guy who believed in tariffs. Clinton was a strong dollar free trader who brought China into the world economy. Trump needs to bring him into his tent. I know the guys have stayed away from each other. I know the guys don't like each other. I know Trump showed up to a debate with women who accused Bill Clinton of sexual assault. Trump needs to make nice with Bill Clinton. Trump needs to sit down with Bill Clinton. Quite frankly, Trump needs to have Bill Clinton as a regular person he consults with. Now, if Bill Clinton doesn't want the invitation, fair enough. We understand it. It's a free country. You can say no even to the President of the United States. But the country would greatly benefit from those two guys burying the hatchet, so to speak. From Trump benefiting from Clinton's knowledge of economics. From there being an ongoing conversation about things like strong dollar versus weak dollar. Other people who Trump needs to man up and bury the hatchet with include Mitt Romney, right, who Trump should have had as our Secretary of State, and Mark Cuban, right? Let's also recognize a profound change in the American political climate. This video is going a little bit longer than I'd hoped. I'll try to speed through these last few points. There are more independent voters right now than there are registered GOP voters. It's only a matter of time before third parties once again emerge front and center in a major political race, as they did in 1992 in the presidential race. If I'm Trump, I need to give them legitimacy. The dialogue between the GOP and the Democrats has led to a $36 trillion debt for the United States, right? It's also poor, right? I mean, nothing's been done to make Social Security sustainable, to make Medicaid sustainable, right, to address the pension shortfall that we know existed. Kamala Harris just had a VP, Tim Walz, whose state has an ongoing pension crisis that you might not have heard about. I encourage people to Google Ted Seidel's investigation of pension plans in Missouri, right? So understand, with all these independents, there's going to be a race where the independents realize that the Democrats and the Republicans don't have the answers. If I'm Donald Trump, I make it a policy of mine to meet with people like Chase Oliver, libertarian, people like Cornel West, progressive, people like Jill Stein, progressive, right? I would make it a point to meet with third-party people. Not only that, I would encourage the Democratic Party, using the power of the bully pulpit, to actually include third-party candidates in debates. Let me also say, too, I would make it a point to talk with real power. Look this up. Richard Nixon invited Blackstone Ranger Jeff Fort to his inauguration. If you're from Chicago, you probably know who Jeff Fort is. Right? Understand, people have power. They may have a lot of baggage. They may have problems. They may be operating outside of the law in some areas. But if they have power, you need to talk with them. The presidency should not be an ongoing photo opportunity. So, let me ask the question, how is one going to understand Chicago without having a line of communication with Louis Farrakhan? Right? If I'm Donald Trump, I make sure that I have lines of communication with people who a sizable part of the population might have strong objections with. Right? So Maduro, Venezuela, I would sit down, I would talk with him. These Mexican gangs, people like El Chapo, I would sit down, I would try to talk with him. Right? You need to talk with real power. The goal is the well-being of the United States. Right? You need to include people in the conversation. There have been some weekends in Chicago where dozens of people have been shot. Right, folks? You need a pipeline, in my opinion, to different parts of urban cities so that when things like that happen, you know the people to talk to. You have a better idea about the lay of the land. You can be responsive. You can help prevent future tragedies like that from happening. Let me talk about another important priority. And again, the people I'm going to mention, they could say no to the President of the United States. But if you're Donald Trump, you reach out to them. The only continent getting younger right now is Africa. Africa has more than 1 billion people. If he hasn't done so already, President Trump needs to privately reach out to Jay-Z, who is doing some great things, along with Jack Dorsey, in spreading the use of cryptocurrency, digital assets, to the African continent. I would reach out to Jay-Z. I would also try to reach out to Dwyer to discuss their approach to digital asset regulation. I would include Vivek in the conversation. Vivek is a very important part of Donald Trump's inner circle, right? It's Vivek who talked to Donald Trump about the evils of a central bank digital currency. Vivek understands cryptocurrency. I would also reach out to, believe it or not, the Democratic governor of Colorado, Jared Polis, right? Who, believe it or not, is a longtime crypto person. Right? He's talked with people like Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum. Right? If I'm Trump, I reach out to folks. I keep a close eye on Africa. We've been out hustled in Africa by China, believe it or not. Right? Just understand, digital currencies, once you have a phone, you have an accounting system, you have financial records. Let me also say, too, that Custodia Bank, I reach out to them. right? We have a situation where Signature Bank, some other banks got torpedoed. Understand there are people in Congress who are actively working against digital assets, right? I would reach out to the crypto community, particularly the banking sector, right? Not just DeFi, but also banks like Custodia. And I would make sure they get what they need. Finally, federal spending has got to drop at least 20%. Folks, it's an existentialist threat right now to the United States. Right? Just understand. In fact, I encourage people to Google Luke Grumman. If I'm President Trump, Luke Grumman is one of the first people I call. Right? Our ongoing deficits during peacetime, simply put, they're unsustainable. We're not going to grow our top line exponentially when the stock market is already overvalued. Look at the Buffett indicator. Right? We need to find a way to reduce the size of our federal government. You can use AI as an excuse to lay off a lot of workers. You need to stop federal hiring right now. You need to find a way to offshore a lot of government to private players. Right? You heard me mention that possibility with opportunity zone legislation. You need to do that now. Let me close with perhaps the most important statement I'm going to make here. You need to let markets clear. Understand, the stock market is hopelessly overvalued right now. Again, I encourage people to look up the current levels of the Buffett indicator. Right? Hopelessly overvalued. When that bubble pops, the federal government cannot save investors from their losses. That's a strategy we used back in the W and Obama days. That didn't work. That left you, the American taxpayer, holding the bag. That left us with all this debt on our sheet. Right? If I'm Donald Trump, early, I have to tell people, the stock market, the housing market, they could be overvalued. He could use diplomatic language. You and I know they are both hopelessly overvalued. You and I understand that housing is going to explode, right? Look at Reventure Consulting videos here on YouTube. Look at Sachs Realty videos here on YouTube. Listen to Thoughtful Money here on YouTube. Listen to Harry Dent here on YouTube. Just type in each. Sachs Realty, Economy, Harry Dent, Real Estate, Reventure Consulting, Nick Gurley. Folks, the information is out there. It's being actively ignored. What Donald Trump has to do is to give investors a heads up. You're not going to be saved, right? We're not going to be giving you $25,000 to buy your first home. No, the housing sector right now is already a Ponzi. When it breaks, Trump has to have the strength to let the market clear. Understand, you have a lot of young people who find the housing market has priced them out. America is better with affordable housing, with sustainable markets in the housing sector. So what you have is an aberration right now. People's parents paid 3 or 4 times the median income to buy their homes. Now in some areas, homes are going for 10, 12, 15 times the median incomes. That's unsustainable. You can't prop it up. Once Humpty Dumpty falls off the wall, it's over. Right? Trump has to let markets clear. He needs to telegraph that. So shrewd homeowners can say, you know what? This is the top of the market. It takes some time to sell a house. let's put our home on the market. Or let's take advantage of modern technology and open door to get our house sold. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. I understand people have different ideas. Feel free to share those ideas in the comment section of this video. Let me also say this too. For those into party politics, the Democrats actually had an excellent opportunity here to beat Donald Trump. He was beatable. What the Dems lacked was the courage to have an open convention. You heard me mention Jared Polis here, right? There's some very savvy Democrats out there. There's some very pro-business Democrats out there. Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland. But understand, sometimes it takes something like an open convention to introduce these people to the American public. Also, the Dems need to stop being a monolith. They need to allow new ideas. You have a lot of pro-gun Dems out there, right? So they should have had an open convention. Had Kamala Harris won the open convention, she would have had a lot more legitimacy. She would have had more wind behind her. She would have also been forced to articulate her vision, right? Too much of her vision seemed to be a belated attempt to copy Trump, right? So this border wall idea, where Kamala, a few months before the election, suddenly embraces a border wall, suddenly is tough on illegal immigrants, 3.5 years into her term as vice president. Folks, that was too high of a buy-in. Understand, people like Josh Shapiro, we should have been introduced to them in an open convention, right? Different factions of the Democratic Party should have openly, respectfully disagreed with each other, right? You do have the Elizabeth Warren anti-cryptocurrency part of the party. You do have those in the party who want to tax unrealized gains. One wonders how they would do that, right? You also had the part of the party that's pro-cryptocurrency, right? Why fake it? Why make it look like there's a consensus when there's no consensus? Why not have people get on stage and say, hi, I'm Josh Shapiro. I've won multiple statewide elections in the state of Pennsylvania. Here's what I think. Here's who I am. Right? The Democrats didn't do that. They went the anointment route. Suddenly, here was Kamala Harris. We were supposed to believe that the entire party agreed with her on all these issues. Right? We were supposed to ignore all these videos of her from the past talking about mandatory buybacks of guns. Right? Understand, there's even a video where she's at a presidential debate. One of the people involved in the debate was Joe Biden, who would go on to win the Democratic nomination. And as Kamala was talking about using an executive order to outlaw many firearms, it was Senator Joe Biden, former Vice President Joe Biden, who had to tell her that there were constitutional issues with what she was proposing. Right, folks, with all that tape on Kamala Harris, with all these new Dems with different views, the Dems pivoted toward Kamala. They didn't pivot toward an open discussion. What that led to was comical. Right? I'm supposed to believe that black men who have supported countless women in their goal of becoming mayor, right? Karen Bass, you heard me mention her earlier. The current mayor of Los Angeles, one of the biggest cities in the United States, had a lot of black male support. Right? Understand there are countless black women who got a lot of black male support for positions of power. And I was supposed to then listen to a former president tell me that if you're a black man and you did not support Kamala Harris, you were a sexist. Right, folks? The level of the dialogue was absurd. Right? It was absurd. So I feel that the Democrats dropped the ball here. I'm hoping that the Democrats do some self-investigation. They'll go forward how they see fit. I'm hoping Donald Trump reaches out to Democrats. You heard me mention a possible pardon of Hunter Biden. You've heard me mention Donald Trump reaching out to Mark Cuban, who was an active supporter of Kamala Harris. I'm hoping that these major parties can cooperate. But I'm also hoping that third parties have a bigger role in politics. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.